Right now, I'm actually recording what's going on, so the app is recording my voice. I've got this tool right here, the laser pointer tool. There used to be a light, oh yeah. There's a lightsaber that you can use as a pointer. I can draw on the slides so you can make annotations. And what this app is doing right now is it's recording it all. So if I stop. So a normal practice of mine, and one of the reasons I like teaching classes as discovery classes, is because I tend to record all of my classes, or at least when I'm giving presentations, and then I post them as videos exported from this app to YouTube. So everybody, if you miss a class, you can go to YouTube and watch a movie of, not me, but whatever's happening on the screen. May not be as pertinent to this class as it is to other classes I teach that are tablet classes. But in a nutshell, that's why I like Explain Everything. And because we're going to be doing presentations in class, this is one option of an app you can use to help you give a presentation. So now, before we get into the bulk of today, which is mainly syllabus and introduction, here are a variety of short little articles, snippets from websites and so forth, having to do with bioethics. Does anybody recognize any of these? So let's see, what do we have? We've got bioethicists are setting up consultations for research, but some scientists question whether they are needed. So bioethicists, maybe like me, are going to companies and saying, you need to pay me so that I can help you and make sure that you're not running into or you're managing all of your ethical issues wisely. What do you think about that?
It's a bit of a double-edged sword in a way. It's what makes you, who watches or watch me, basically.
Sure. So here's an ethical issue in having to do with ethics. Should ethicists be promoting their use as ethicists for pay? Or maybe bioethicists should only be used when somebody recognizes the need for one and approaches them proactively? Something to think about. This photograph, which is primary data from a research article, it's a picture of a fruit fly wing. That has to do with misrepresentation of scientific data, image manipulation, fraud. So that's one of the main topics we'll talk about. We'll talk about conflicts of interest this semester, having to do with, for example, this bioethics consultancy thing. We'll talk about deliberate fraud and manipulation of data. We'll talk about other forms of fraud. This was a huge one. Stimulus triggered fake conversion of somatic cells into pluripotent stem cells. So this was a group that claimed that they had come up with a novel experimental way to turn normal cells into stem cells. And it turned out that a lot of their data was made up. After it was published in, what journal is it? Nature. So Nature got some egg on their face because they peer-reviewed and then published something that had falsified data in it. And of course the authors, well, listen, we will talk about what happened to the authors. And then there's this one in the middle. A statement from one journal that offers to publish your papers. Does that sound like a journal that you want to send your manuscript and money to? Sounds sort of suspicious to me. Yeah, we're a publisher. You can send us money to publish your paper, but in case we have to flee the country, we are not giving your money back. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about publication ethics as well. We'll talk about all factors of ethics related to the scientific manuscript publication process. Peer review, publishing, how to choose journals, what goes into choosing which journal you think should publish your research, and so forth. And that's why this is called applied bioethics. So it's ethics having to do with biology, and it's applied in the sense that we're not talking about philosophy of ethics. We're talking about actual real-world application you can take to use in the laboratory in very likely commonplace situations that you'll encounter as biologists. Any questions at this point? We'll talk course mechanics in a couple minutes, but today is just introduction. Okay, so aside from that, I'd love to get your feedback. So here's use number 1 of tablets. If you don't have your tablet, that's okay. But go to this website. So open a web browser, whichever one you have. Go to that URL. If you have it. Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely. This website should work on smartphone as well as a tablet. So you just have to enter a nickname for yourself, join the room, and then you can type in the text field there. And this is just mainly for, well, I know we could talk, but why would we talk when we could look at our screens and type things to each other? So yes, most of the term we'll actually be talking and not typing, but this is one technique that we'll use during the semester as well for collecting feedback in the course. This website, todaysmeet.com. And if you don't have anything to add, just post a hi everybody, how are you doing? But if you've thought about a particular ethical issue you think we should talk about this term, I'm happy to arrange it so that we can cover that topic as well if it's not already on the syllabus. And if you have a technical issue, raise your hand. We'll come fix it. Well, Emily will come fix it. Yeah, we get used to those sounds pretty rapidly. Tablet classes. In fact, I think I have conflicting statements in the syllabus about turn off any noise-making features, except that sometimes they're actually useful to have. Okay. So animal testing. So we're going to talk about research ethics related to animals, and that can include animal testing. Ooh. Yeah, manipulation of statistics. Ah, you guys are coming up with good ones. I like this. Yeah. So choosing which citations to use, an ethical issue. So, especially if you're publishing in a journal like Nature or Science or PNAS, where you're only allowed a certain number of papers you can cite. You have to be very careful about who you cite and who you don't cite. You want to make sure you're being politically correct in citing the big names and anybody who might be a reviewer on your paper, and you can't cite everybody. Do you self-cite? Do you cite all of your own papers, which boosts your publication metrics? You know, the number of, so you can brag about how many times your paper has been cited, except you were the one that did most of those citations of your own paper. Yeah. Excellent. So, why am I here? You're here because you have to be. I apologize because I pushed this being a required class. And the reasons I'm here are because I enjoy talking about ethics, and also because it's important for you to be versed in ethical issues in biology. The other reason I'm here is because I'm a biologist, so this is just a really brief introduction about who I am and what I do. I've been here for 3.5 years now. This is my 4th year, so it'll be the end of my 4th year this year. And I work on speciation genetics using this microscopic nematode that doesn't look microscopic when you display it on the screen like that, but it really is. They're about 1 millimeter in size. And model organism closely related to C. elegans, which many of you are probably more familiar with than its sister species, C. briggsae. So I'm a geneticist. I work on those organisms that come from a variety of places around the world, and what I'm really interested in doing in the laboratory is crossing individuals from these different populations, like from Japan and from India. And I found a while ago that if you take some of these individuals of this species from Japan and some from India and you mate them with each other, this curious thing happens down here on the bottom. By itself, individuals from India, that's AF16. Oh, by the way, these worms have their males in the population, they're hermaphrodites. So they're 2 sexes, but it's not males and females, it's males and hermaphrodites the hermaphrodites can self-reproduce. So you can take a single hermaphrodite and ask how many offspring does she produce we call her she, even though, well, maybe we could talk about that in ethics too. What pronoun do you use for a hermaphrodite? I don't know. So she'll produce about 220 of her own offspring. And if you take an individual from Japan, she produces about 190 offspring. Those are not statistically significantly different numbers. But if you mate them together, an AF16 and an HK104 individual, look at their offspring have statistically significantly lower numbers of offspring of their own. So the offspring are sick, essentially, the hybrids. And this is evidence that suggests that what's happening between the Indian and the Japanese populations of this species is they're becoming different species, right? Eventually destined to do the horse and the donkey trick, where you take 2 individuals that are related, you cross them together and they make a hybrid that's totally unfit. They don't produce any offspring of their own, or the offspring they produce are sterile, like the mule. So basically I study the genetics of species formation, which may or may not have anything to do with ethics. So the real reason I'm here is because I enjoy talking about ethics, and I enjoy interacting with students and helping them think through some issues and gain tools for dealing with some of the issues that you will encounter in science. I started off doing this by helping an instructor. When I was a postdoctoral scientist at University of Maryland, I was helping a faculty member there, a full professor who taught ethics at University of Maryland. I was just volunteering because I needed to get teaching experience to be able to get a professor position. And it happened that I already had sort of a minor interest in ethics, but helping her teach that course really helped me be even more interested in teaching research ethics. That's the main reason I'm here. It's not because I'm an ethicist, it's because I enjoy this topic, and I think it's important to talk to you about. More important for you to talk to each other about. So I run a research lab here in the biology department. So if you get anything out of this class, it's simply getting experience before you need it. And that's what this class is all about. It's giving you questions that you should ask yourselves before you get into trouble. Throw out that motto of it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Don't do something first without asking permission. Say, oh, I'll just, it's going to be okay. I'll ask for forgiveness later. In biology, the repercussions are pretty severe if you screw up even the first time. Some people are nice and will give you a second chance. Sometimes you don't get a second chance. And so we're here to give you the experience before you actually earn it on your own. That's the goal. Okay. So one thing we're going to talk about this term is conflict of interest. It's a big one, like the bioethicists trying to sell their services to scientists. So I'd like you to help me out with my own case study. You might have read in the syllabus that every week we're going to talk about a case study. So a made-up fictional scenario, but we're going to discuss the ethics within that scenario and try to come to a consensus of what should person X do in this case. This is me. So about a week ago, I got an invitation. We're going to talk about the peer review process of literature as we go. Some of you are probably already familiar with that. But I was asked by a publisher to review a manuscript. So I got an email in my inbox that said, "Dear Dr. Ross, would you please consider reviewing this paper that these authors have submitted to our journal for publication?" So I can choose to be part of the peer review process. I read their paper, I decide whether it's good or not, and I suggest to the editor of the journal, should this paper be published in your journal or not? So I can be one of those anonymous 3 reviewers that lie in the balance between whether your paper gets published or whether it doesn't. It turns out that the senior author on the paper that they asked me to review is a friend of mine. So this is all about conflict of interest. So we know each other, we know each other professionally. We work on similar topics, which is why you get asked to be a reviewer, because you're an expert in that topic. So it's not uncommon for these sorts of issues to arise, that you send a paper in and somebody who knows you reviews your paper. So now journals have set up all of these intricate definitions of what constitutes conflict of interest. So the journal editors send you, it's big, it's long, it's like a page and a half from the journal that asked me to review this paper. So all these definitions. In these situations, we'd like you to say, no, I won't review the paper, because these clearly constitute a conflict of interest. What sort of situations do you think those might be? So I said a friend. That doesn't count.
If you're married to someone?
Okay, so yes, so if you're, in fact, I don't know if their policy actually said that or not, but yes, I would hope that there are certain relationships that you have with people that should prevent you from peer reviewing conflict of interest. In this case, for this journal, the only one I remember offhand was it was either at the same department or in the same institution. That is, if this was an author from the biology department or from Fresno State in general, I would have to declare that to be a conflict of interest and not review the manuscript. In this case, this person is not from Fresno State. And some of this I wrote up here already, so I guess I put some hints in there. So this paragraph up here is what I wrote to the editor that asked me to review this paper. Basically, I said, I know this person, but then I outlined our relationship for the editor of the journal. And I said, can you please, editor of the journal, help me figure out whether or not I have a conflict of interest? So this senior author is formally, my advisor on a grant that's funded by the federal government. So my grant, but the senior author on the paper is my advisor on that grant. He's supposed to mentor me in things like being ethical. But as I write there, he doesn't receive any funding from the grant. So that's another detail that's often put into these conflict of interest statements. If you are both collaborating on a grant where you both receive money, then you have sort of a vested interest in each other's success. So if I help him get his paper published, then we're more likely to get more money from more grants, that sort of thing. So you can't have grants together, you can't be at the same institution, you can't be married. We've never been, so all these things I listed were criteria. We've never been co-PIs, that is co-authors on a grant. We've never published a paper together, never been co-authors, and we've never had a mentor-trainee relationship. That is, I was never his, or he was never my graduate student or postdoc, which constitutes a conflict of interest. So that's the minimal bar for level of relationship, if you've ever been a professor-student or student-professor. The detail that's not on here, again, when I'm asking for your advice now, so I'm hoping you're going to help. I haven't made a decision yet. What we decide today, I'm going to write back to the journal and tell them what I think, if I'm going to review or not. The detail I didn't provide is that the senior author of the manuscript I'm to review and I are currently writing a manuscript together, but it's not published yet. So technically, according to this journal's guidelines, we would only have a conflict of interest if we had published together, meaning that it would have been accepted and published. We're just not quite to that part of the process of writing a manuscript and publishing it yet. So do I have a conflict of interest, and should I not review this manuscript or not? What do you think? Why is conflict of interest an issue in the first place?
I think you do. I think you have a conflict of interest. Because if you're co-writing a paper now, then by reviewing this and saying, yeah, this is fine to be published, then in theory you could be using his name to, also make sure that your paper gets published. So if his paper gets published.
So there are some intricacies here. So it might be depending on, so an important thing to know, which we'll learn later probably, about peer review is that at this point, I didn't tell you yet, all I've seen is the abstract of the submitted manuscript and the list of authors. So I kind of know from the abstract what sort of things are in the paper, but I don't know the details until I say, yes, I will review it. Then they send me the full manuscript to look at. So it's very possible that I will suggest changes to this manuscript, if I review it, that would be favorable to my coming in right after that and making some contrary claims in my manuscript that are provocative and interesting in relation to what was just published in the field, this paper that I've reviewed. So there's definitely the opportunity for me to force these authors to massage their manuscript in a way that benefits me down the road. But that's always true, because every time you're asked to be a reviewer, it's because you have expertise in that field. You're a player in the field. So does my knowing the senior author on this paper and us currently working on a manuscript together constitute sufficient conflict of interest?
Would your grant benefit from him publishing it even if he isn't benefiting from the grant itself?
Let's see. So would my grant benefit, or say, since I've already got the grant, would my ability to attract more money in the same line of research benefit from this being published? That's a fabulous question. So that's exactly the sort of question to ask for conflict of interest purposes. And that's why I mentioned that I don't know what their findings are yet, because I haven't read the full manuscript. So I can't yet assess whether or not what they found complements what I'm working on or maybe refutes it. I would argue that it probably would benefit the micro field we work in, the small little section of molecular genetics that we work in, to have more papers published on that topic. Because then in the introduction to the next grant, you can write, look at all this work that's been done already, but here are some key places that we need to focus future efforts.
Wouldn't that though be the case if it gets published by anyone else? If it gets reviewed by anyone else? Because if it's in the same field, it's like what you said before, so if it's in the same field, it would probably attract more money anyway, whether you do it or not.
Fair enough. Can you really find an impartial reviewer? Ever? Yeah. If people that are reviewing are always experts in the field. Excellent point.
But couldn't the publication of this person, if it's received well, give more clout to your research if you're working on it together then?
It could. On the other hand, there's always another hand. On the other hand, it's also possible, so this senior author and I work so closely, well, on such similar topics that sometimes we have issues both getting funded because we do such similar research that one funding agency won't give both of us money to do essentially the same thing. So it could also be in my benefit to see this guy fail. I've got a chance to knock somebody out of my little niche of scientific research. Not really. I mean, he's much better funded and has many more publications than I do. So in reality, it's more like the opposite. Whenever I publish, he's probably a reviewer that's asked to look at my manuscripts. And although I don't want to steal anybody's thunder from later in the semester, when we talk about authorship and peer review, this is why peer review is anonymous. It doesn't have to be. If, as a reviewer, you can opt to sign your review, and then the authors get to see your name associated with the review that you've given their paper. Most of the time, though, nobody wants to do that because puny little me here, I don't want to piss anybody off that's holding purse strings to grants, that reviews grants, or will review my future papers. So that's why peer review tends to be anonymous.
Could you, in theory, harm your chances by reviewing the paper? Or is that more of like a positive feedback situation?
It could go either way. So ultimately, to me, my opinion, what it comes down to is, if I say, yes, I will review this paper, can I trust myself to be objective as I can? That's basically the essence of conflict of interest. There is always a conflict of interest somehow, somewhere, minute or huge. So I'm still trying to figure out, should I review this manuscript or not?
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So if you review it, do you have to turn your review in?
That's an excellent question that I never actually thought of before, and that's why it's nice having non-experts in the class as well. So what happens to me if I review the manuscript and if I read the manuscript and then I don't turn in a review?
Like you're like, okay, I'm not objective. Like you realize.
So who loses in that scenario?
It's the journal.
So the journal gets pissed at me because I said I was going to review it, and then a month or 2 months later, I say, you know what, I'm not going to. Yeah, I know, and I would explain why, but then, so normally you get 3 reviews for a manuscript, 3 anonymous reviews for a manuscript. So I was one of the 3, I am potentially one of the 3 reviewers. And then a month passes, and then the journal doesn't hear from me, or they do hear from me, and I say, I'm sorry, I don't feel like I can review this manuscript. Then they have to solicit a 3rd reviewer. So it takes the review process longer, which is bad for the authors because they're trying to get this paper published so they can move on and focus on the next thing. So it hurts the authors for me to drag out the process longer.
Could it also hurt you in the idea that you won't get chosen again?
That's right. So if you piss off the editors of the journal, then they stop asking you to review papers for them, which isn't a huge deal, but it is important. It's an important part of my job to contribute to my professional societies and in its service. And that's one of the ways that academics do service, which is one of the 3 components of our jobs: teaching, research, and service. So it's not a big deal, but yeah, it's something I think about when I'm trying to consider what to do here. Okay, so keep those in mind. I'm going to move on to a little bit of technical stuff about the class before we maybe come to a conclusion, or maybe we don't come to a conclusion about that. But I have to write back soon because now I'm starting to get the everyday automated email from the journal. Dr. Ross, please remember that we sent you an email 3 weeks ago asking you to kindly review this manuscript. So did anybody have any questions about course mechanics, syllabus? I've highlighted some stuff, but I'm not going to go through the syllabus in detail. You read it beforehand. If anybody's brave enough to purchase the electronic version of the course textbook, I guess I already gave it away. You're brave. I have not tried to download it. I don't know if it's compatible with any of the tablet platforms. There is an electronic version you can purchase directly from the publisher. So if you're willing to try it, go for it. But otherwise, there are plenty of used copies of the textbook on Amazon if you want to go that route.
Is it just kind of like a list of articles together, or?
This textbook is a written textbook that includes some case studies at the end. So it's not a list of articles. So the author has a website that you can go to that has supplemental material for the text.
Okay. They never ever, on the website, they never even say that it's supplemental material, so you just click around on it.
Right.
Kind of confused.
Yeah, so go to the URL that's at the bottom of the first page of the syllabus, asmscience.org, the American Society of Microbiology, and dig around there for more information about the book before you decide, unless you've already bought it. Before you decide what to do, check there first. You can make an informed decision. Okay. So semester is broken down into the first half of the semester we do group presentations on chapters in the textbook. The latter half of the semester we do single student presentations after everybody's comfortable with everybody else and in using tablets to do presentations. We do single student presentations on not fictional case studies but actual real world examples of ethical issues, ethics gone wrong in biology. And because, as you've already seen, enrollment is fluctuating, the discussion facilitator column, that is which student I already signed up for, which week, will probably modulate slightly as we add students, subtract students from the class. So we will constantly be talking about this to make sure that everybody can attend the week that they're signed up for.
Dr. Ross?
Yeah.
Does the addition of the textbook matter at all?
No, it doesn't.
No?
Yeah, shouldn't. The only way it might is, I don't think the case studies have changed. So at the end of every chapter, there are 4, 5, 6 case studies that the author wrote. And every week we'll talk about one of those case studies. So I'm hoping that, and we'll find out.
Yeah.
Somebody says, we're going to talk about case study 10.2, and you read your version of 10.2 and it's totally different. That might happen, but other than that, no, it doesn't matter what edition of the hard copy you purchase. Okay. So I'm going next week to sort of give this is how the presentations might look. Don't use me as the best example. I'm just going to give an example. So I'm going to do the presentation next week. Feel free to copy the way I do it if you like for your group and individual presentations. Let's see, anything else important to point out? Yes, because the grade is so heavily based on presentation, you are all earning points right now for asking questions and interacting. That's the attendance part, the participation grade, small part of the grade. Most of it is presentation points, right? So 25% on, 25% on discussion, 30% on the final exam. It will not be an in-class final as you read. So I will it'll be written. I'll hand out details close to the end of the semester, and then it'll be due at the time of our in-class final that's scheduled. It's all in the syllabus schedule on the back page. And 45% for participation. So if you don't show up and ask questions or give your opinions, which usually last term this went really well, everybody was jumping in and there were battles and fights and it was great. Well, not physical fights. That would probably be unethical for me to stimulate. Okay. You don't need to know how to use your tablet. This is the main ways that I was envisioning using tablets in this class, but feel free to use them however you like. Note-taking, reading PDFs related to historical incidents, and so forth. By the way, you might have already seen also in the syllabus that part of the group presentation related to the scenarios that we talk. So every group pick a scenario. This week, by next week I give a presentation. The student group going the week after needs to announce next week which scenario everybody should read. So a week in advance, everybody knows what to read for the next week. And as part of that scenario, each group should solicit advice or opinions from faculty, professionals, probably not your brother or sister, but somebody who has maybe an informed opinion to make about the scenario. So often students just interview their PIs, their advisors. So I'll try to remind your advisors that they should be expecting to hear from you about this. It's not mandatory that you ask them, though, so please approach them nicely and ask. Don't say, Dr. Ross told me to ask you this. Right? Ask nicely. Say, do you please have 15 minutes when we can talk about this? Email them the scenario in advance, maybe, so they can read it, and then have a 5 or 10 minute discussion about the scenario. So that when you present the scenario and we have a class discussion at the end of class, sometimes students have used their tablets, speaking of ways to use their tablets, to record the interview with the professional. And so we watch a video of the professional giving their opinion about the scenario. What do they think should happen in this situation? Is it ethical or not, etc. So it's really interesting, I hope you find, to hear how different opinions from biologists or chemists or whoever you ask can be about particular situations. And this is all to underscore the need to have, if you take nothing else away from this semester, the need to have multiple mentors. So not just to rely on one person to give you advice, but to solicit advice from multiple people and try to get a sense of what's the consensus on this issue. Okay, enough of me yapping. Now it's time for you to do something with the tablet. This is, although it's not as big a deal in a class this small, but I do this for all of my discovery classes. You don't have to do this now, maybe by next class. So if you don't feel like you're done up enough right now, take a selfie, email it to me, subject line your name. And because I've got some brain issues, it helps me to study student name, student picture, make the match. I test myself. And by the end of the semester, I know everybody's name and face combined. This is much more important when I have that 90 student genetics class tomorrow. But
your email isn't the mail.fresno?
You can send it to that one as well.
So
important point, having nothing to do with bioethics. The faculty don't have the mail dot in their email addresses. If you do send an email to a faculty member at mail.fresnostate.edu, it won't bounce back because there is an email address with that address. That is an email address. Some of the faculty don't know they have that address, and they never check it. So if you ever email a faculty member at mail.fresnostate.edu and you never hear back, that's probably why. It went into the black hole that they never check. Yeah. And remember, I'm posting this as a video after class to YouTube, and everybody can, not that this is interesting, but you can always go back and not only do I post this as a video, but anytime, again, not really relevant for this class because you will be giving presentations. Every time I present something, which like for next week, I will post a PDF of the slides the day before class on Blackboard. So right now you could go to Blackboard and download the PDF of what we're looking at right now. So if you want to take notes on top of my slides, you could do that using a PDF and any PDF annotation program. Adobe Reader, Explain Everything, or others. Any other questions about course mechanics at this point? Basically all I wanted to cover. Talked about the textbook, final exam. Okay. So we already said that stuff. Read the chapter 1 of the textbook. That's the case study I'm going to cover. It's not from chapter 1, it's from chapter 2. But that's because chapter 1 has no case studies for whatever reason. And then for next week, the first group of students should be announcing the scenario that they want us to read for the following week. And the last thing we're going to do today, this is where we might break some tablets. Probably not, but we'll see. It would be to open your Socrative student app. So one other workflow, we're just practicing today. This is a quiz, online quiz. Don't stress out, it's more for participation than for getting the right answer. It's a quiz about the syllabus. So if you open this, and does anybody not have this app, by the way? Well, you're excused.
I don't, because I can't access the internet with this tablet right now.
Okay, so you're excused also. But you want to practice this workflow because we will be using it for doing in-class participation activities in subsequent weeks.
Can we access it later on?
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to make sure, especially while we have a guide on the go here, that for those of you that do have internet access and this app, that you practice using this app. So you do earn points for doing this. They're just not high stakes points right now. They may become more high stakes later in the term. And all you have to do is enter your name in the last name, comma, first name format after you enter that class number. So the class number takes us to our quiz. My class number is always 240820.
So type in 240820 and then what?
And then,
Your last name, comma, first name.
yeah. Oh, that's your student number, sorry. So yeah, just
What do I do?
remember, yeah, sorry. 240820, that's the number. And then join.
Oh, just join.
Yeah, and then it'll ask you. Or, yeah, there you go. And then once you submit that, then it'll start giving you questions about the syllabus.
I don't know my student ID number.
Oh.
Another important point, yes. Every time you do anything for this class, please, please, please have your student number, although again, because there's only 6 of us, it's not critical. But also, anytime you sign up for electronic resources, or send me emails, or participate electronically in any way, please use your mail.fresnostate.edu account. Not a personal Gmail account, or anything like that, because that'll screw up various bits of workflow that we use. So please, please, please use your official Fresno State email address for signing into things. All right. Eric's speeding ahead. He's got 5 of the 6 questions already completed. Everyone else is just getting going. We're getting mixed results. Look, you can all watch as people fill in different answers. It's fabulous. So often I'll use this, although maybe not as much in this class, to get a sense of how students are perceiving different topics at any given point in time. It's becoming clear to me that all of you are fairly comfortable talking in front of each other and giving your opinions. But when it's a 90 student class and it's sophomores, sometimes it's harder to solicit that feedback. So I like to use the anonymous, if I turn the screen back around like this, the anonymous feedback I can get using Socrative. So there's mixed results to question number 2, but everybody else is pretty much getting the rest of the questions right. So that's, any other questions? So next week we're going to show up, I'm going to give the presentation, it'll be an example presentation. The week following we'll start student presentations. The format for the presentations is in the syllabus, so especially student group number 1, take a look before, and of course, ask me any questions you have about, anybody, ask me any questions you have about what to put in a presentation. What I'm looking at mostly for presentations is fostering discussion. So being provocative and getting conversation going in the class, not so much how many PowerPoint slides you put together or what's on the PowerPoint slides. Discussion's key. Okay, and when you're done, when you submit, it'll say something like waiting for instructor to finish, something like that. At that point, you're done, you can log out, you can close the app. That just means that other students are still working.